Hi, I'm Julie Ross.
And I'm Gregory Abbey.
And you're listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
Julie is a longtime parent educator and counselor.
And Greg is an actor, writer, and director, and more importantly, a parent just like you.
Through conversations covering a range of different topics, challenges, and roadblocks, we hope to give you a few of Julie's tools that might just help make parenting a little bit easier.
Look, nobody's perfect, and parenting is challenging, to say the least. With a few skills under our belts, though, we might just be able to be good enough parents and enjoy the journey and our children a little bit more in the process.
Okay, so let's dive right into this one.
Sure.
I'm going to stop announcing what episode we're on because I'm going to get lost. And
right.
We may switch them around the order, so I'm going to stop doing that. Is that
okay,
all right?
That's perfectly fine with me. I'm in agreement.
Okay, good. So today we're talking about sleeping, bedtimes.
Yeah.
I guess you'd call it the sleep time blues because, you know, bedtimes can be a struggle, obviously, whether it's infancy, toddlers, teens. Is this a problem that you deal with often? Like, do parents come to you with this one a lot?
I'd say at least 30% of my business is counseling around sleep.
And is there a particular age like you deal with the most, or?
I would say mostly from age 2 to age 5, and then again in adolescence.
Right.
Those are the kind of two main developmental periods where sleep tends to be disrupted for one reason or another.
Great. So I think today we're going to talk about some tips and techniques that you can do generally, and then maybe at the end we can touch on specific ages, because obviously this must shift a little bit if you're dealing with a 10-month-old, a 5-year-old,
right,
a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So what are the first things? Well, one of the things I thought, because I reread your chapter last night, and one of the things that is important to keep in mind, like, why is this a struggle? And this is kind of obvious, but you pointed it out, was that, well, who wants to leave the party? Like, you talked about, like, kids getting a sense of, I don't want to go to bed. Wait a second, even at a young age. Like, you guys are staying up and getting down. I don't want to go to sleep.
Right.
And, I was trying to remember back because my kids are now 12. Give me a second. They're 12. They're about to turn. So I'd say 13, 16, and 20. So it's been a while.
Mm-hmm, right.
I mean, I want to touch on sleeping for older kids too, but, I have this really specific memory of when my son he was probably 4, and we're trying to putting him to bed, and he was very angry. He did not want to go to sleep, and it was kind of a struggle, but he kind of went with it. He was pissed off. And we get him to bed, and we get him down, and we go back into the living room. He's kind of fighting it, but he finally gives over. Get him down. We get back to the living room. We're watching our show, and I just remember having this sense, like, I didn't hear anything, but I had a sense. I'm like, something is up with my son. And I remember tiptoeing down the hall, and it's really quiet. And at the time, we lived in an apartment where we kept our stroller in the hallway. And I look in his room, and he's not in his bed. And I turn, and he's sitting in his stroller. And he's got his arms crossed, and he's wide awake. And he's kind of looking at me like, no, man, this is not happening tonight. I guess he wanted to be ready, for the next morning when he goes out. But anyway, my point is like, of course it can be a struggle because they start to feel like they're going to miss out on something fun.
Sure. And the moment that a child has what's called object permanence, which is that when something's out of sight, they know it still exists. Mm-hmm. But that isn't something people are born with. And so the minute they develop that, which happens sometime in, late infancy, that's when that starts. I call it the magician in the living room effect, right? They know that mom and dad or siblings or that something, they might miss out. It's FOMO. It's fear of missing out.
Right.
Really, basically what happens.
So that might be when some of the struggles start.
Oh, for sure. Now, I'm going to say that they can start before that even, but they intensify at that point. And the reason they may start before that is because of some common mistakes, which we'll get into, that parents make around bedtime, and some kind of common principles that it's necessary to adhere to these principles in order for kids to develop healthy sleep habits.
So what are the two things that you talk about if parents come to you and have an issue? You mentioned preparation and ritualization.
So my first goal is always to set a kid up for success, because I think it's not fair to ask them to do something when we haven't set them up to succeed in doing that. And then we set a limit and we demand it, but there's no process in place for these kids.
Well, and part of what you talked about and have talked about is like, it's not about you. How do I make this easier for me? It's about how do I make this easier for the child, right?
Right, exactly. That's kind of the part of the setup for success. And there's a couple of components to that. The first component is to develop a step-by-step routine that stays in the same order night after night after night. And it involves 5 or 6 steps.
Okay.
Really no more than that, and really no less than that.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal of this routine is to get the child to associate a different stage of physiological sleepiness with each successive step as they get toward bedtime.
And this is about this. You've talked about this. This is a transition, right?
Right.
And
right.
that's the main thing. That's what this is leading towards, is helping them with this transition to bed.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you think about it, going from the waking state to the sleeping state is one of the biggest transitions in most people's days, because, we've been active, we've been doing things, we've been up. And then, for adults, an adult might use that transition by, to read a book. And they get a chapter in or a couple pages in and they're getting sleepier. So we take care of it ourselves as adults. But children don't take care of it themselves because they're really under our control still.
Sure.
So this routine that parents need to set up should encompass only about 20 minutes. And again, 5 to 6 specific steps that stay in the same order, so that the first part of the routine is the most active part of the routine.
Okay.
And preferably, if there's anything that takes place outside of the bedroom itself, that should be at the front. So brushing teeth, washing face, going to the bathroom.
Yeah, you've sort of framed it like you want to kind of do the stuff that's more annoying first for the child and move towards the more fun stuff you might do, whether it's reading a book seems to be the most obvious thing I can think of.
Right. And that's part of setting you up for success as a parent, because if your child objects to the routine, there are certain ways that we can reinforce that bedtime is bedtime. But in terms of just the child themselves, taking the parent out of it, the stuff that's most active, it makes sense for the child to go from most active to least active.
Sure.
From things external to the bedroom to things internal to the bedroom. So it might be brushing teeth, going to the bathroom, washing your face, for example. Then, you lower the lights when you get into the bedroom, you read a book, 1 story, 2 stories to the child, or later on the child might read to themselves. And
so
then,
this conditions them to the physiological change you're talking about.
Precisely. So they start fully awake, right? And they're brushing their teeth, and that's still very active, and the lights are on. But then the next step is that they, go into their bedroom and they get their pajamas on. Now it's still fairly active, but they're also in the setting where they're going to fall asleep. So that reduces it a little bit. And then they, sit on parents' lap and have a story, or if it's a smaller child, drink water or milk, or maybe they go into their bed and parent rubs their back. Maybe that's part of the routine, or sings a song or says a prayer or whatever. You can put whatever you want in there, as long as the basic principle exists that you're moving from most active external to the room to least active internal to the room.
And you can have some flexibility around it, because we talk about that often. You bring that up a lot, but it's important to have like a routine that you're following that's the same, that they get sort of used to, because that's going to move them towards being able to fall asleep.
Absolutely. Again, what happens if you do this is the child's body associates being fully awake with bathroom parts of the routine, then being in their room with reading books with the next stage of sleepiness, then lying in their bed with the next stage of sleepiness. And then finally, the lights are out and
I'm about to fall asleep. This
right?
is perfect.
I know.
One of the things I want to go back to, because in terms of the preparation piece, one thing you talk about is giving them some warnings leading up to the routine. So that's part of preparation, right? You think?
Correct. Exactly.
And why? And I mean, I think maybe it's kind of obvious, but remind me, why is it important as opposed to just springing it on them? Like, okay, it's to help with the transition, I imagine.
It is. You're exactly right. So those warnings are going to look like in 15 minutes, it's going to be time to start the routine. In 10 minutes, it's going to be time to start the routine. In 5 minutes, it's going to be time to start the routine. One more minute, and then it's time to start the routine. Okay, it's time to start the routine. And that may seem so prescribed, and you're like, wow, But young children need that lead in. They need that warm up because they have to finish whatever it is that they're doing.
Well, especially if they're going to miss out on the party that's happening in the rest of the house, right?
Exactly. And we want to encourage our listeners to recognize that it's not necessarily really a party, but that's what it is
they're
in terms of the children, right?
FOMO.
It's like it's FOMO.
So before we get into some testing that might come up, right? So the key is preparation. So you're kind of giving them some warnings, so they're getting ready for this transition. Then there's the ritualization, whatever that is for you, and you're kind of focusing on the things that are more kind of chores outside the bedroom, and then moving towards something maybe a little more fun, soothing, whatever, inside the bedroom. What are some of the common mistakes that parents can make?
That's another thing that I, when I'm speaking to parents about their children's sleep habits, I do the setup for success first, but then followed close by is the parent making one of these common mistakes?
Oh, you ask them, you sort of go over this list with parents that might come to you and say, we're having issues.
Right, exactly. So there are a number of common mistakes, and these are mistakes in that they are leading causes of either difficulty falling asleep or middle of the night wakings. So one leading cause is, are you feeding your child any sugar?
Sure.
Before bedtime? And
I have no skills, and I know that one.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Not all parents do, though. And listen, the reality is that sugar does not affect every single person the same way.
Sure.
So it's not always going to be a sleep disruptor. But if you are doing it, and if you're having trouble getting your child to sleep, it becomes part of the setup for success to eliminate any possible causes of difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep. Eliminate those causes. And then if, when the child's sleep straightens out, and I can almost guarantee if parents kind of follow the prescriptions that you and I are talking about, that it will straighten out. If it straightens out, add sugar back in, see if it's a factor,
Sure.
but don't assume it's not. It's better to go from an elimination process to reinforce a more scientific method for figuring out what's going on. So that's one thing.
And what about, you've talked about active play, and maybe that's around this idea that, like, I'm going to wear them out, get them tired.
100%.
I guess you can do that 10 hours earlier, but maybe not before.
Right.
I can hear now my wife going, will you stop roughhousing with them?
Yeah.
They're supposed to go to sleep in 10 minutes.
Yeah. And, a lot of the time that active play happens because a parent or both parents are working during the day. So they come home and they want to play with their kids, but it's too close to bedtime. And so what it does is it revs the child up instead of winds the child down. And one of the things that happens is often that active play creates a second wind for the child, which typically prior to age to tweens and teens, the second wind often happens at, for whatever reason, an 8:00 p.m. time. And if you can get your child in bed by 7:30 or 7:45, they'll be asleep by 8. But if you get your child in bed at 8 or 8:15, they'll be up for another hour, an hour and a half.
Wow. Okay.
And I don't know why that's a universal. I can't, but it's just my experience, that it prior to 8 o'clock is better than after 8 o'clock.
Sure.
So if you think about the working parent, they're out all day at work.
Yeah,
maybe
it's hard. They
get
want to
home.
come home and spend time with the child.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, maybe they get home at 6:37, right? And so they're like, let's play. Let's run around. Let's play, indoor basketball. And then it tips this child into this overstimulated state.
Sure.
And boy, does that wreak havoc with nighttime falling asleep, but also middle of the night wakings.
And what about, television kind of obviously seems like a pretty obvious one in terms of a stimulant you want to avoid, because you can get used to, you mentioned a anecdote in your book about, the child that falls asleep to television, which seems really bad, but obviously I'm assuming you want to avoid kind of electronics and those sorts of things.
Right. And I go beyond, that book was written when there weren't screens other than television.
Right.
If you can
Phones,
imagine
laptops,
that. Right?
Yeah.
But it really does apply to all screens. Screens are a auditory and visual stimulant, but they are a physically passive medium. So what that means is that they kind of psychologically, internally get a lot of ideas and thoughts and images and auditory sounds going on for the child. But because the child is sitting there passively, their body feels sleepy. They may fall asleep in front of the screen and the parent thinks, yay me, I just have to carry my kid to bed now. But that is probably, it's one of two leading causes of middle of the night wakings.
Right. So they might go to bed then, but it's going to wake them up. Or they're going to wake up in the middle of the night.
Often, because those images, you have to think as if it is like what goes in has to come out. We have to bring stuff in, we have to digest it.
Right.
And then we have to release the waste, right? And I'm not talking about food, but that's part of, we have to do that with food.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of this stuff that if the child is taking it in via a screen within 2 hours prior to bedtime, and I want to really emphasize that, within 2 hours prior to bedtime, and I can hear parents screaming as I say this in, on this podcast, screaming like, I can't do that. I can only tell you it's true. That most of the time, if you've got a child who's waking in the middle of the night, or really early in the morning, like 4:30, we're looking at the fact that they have undigested information that they need to digest, that they need to work out mentally. And they're working it out in dreams, they're working it out in nightmares, they're working it out in just the brain racing. And I think most adults have had an experience like that.
Yeah, of course. I'm wondering how it shifts, because as you're describing that, do you have an age range around that sort of philosophy, 2 hours before? And how does it change when they get into middle and like now I have high school age kids?
Well, I'm not sure it changes a lot, Greg.
Oh.
Now with the influx of new technology and iPads and, other kinds of screens, I think the scientific research is coming out. You've read about the blue lights from a screen. I think we're seeing that it doesn't really change, even for adults.
Right.
That often it's problematic.
So maybe when we get, because we could probably delve into it now, but I want to circle back later on in this episode to talk about teenagers, because the idea that I'm getting my teenagers to get off all their electronics 2 hours before they go to bed is really a struggle.
Well, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So there are some things that we have to give up as parents, but we can talk about that when we get to the teenage
we can
part
aspire
of it.
to that.
Yeah,
okay.
We can aspire to that.
And the last one you have is laying down with the child, which obviously is a common one. Why does that become, or how can it become problematic?
And that's a good one because it's representative of a bigger category. And the bigger category is the conditions, the physical conditions under which your child falls asleep need to be maintained throughout the night in order for them to stay asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of lying down with the child, You lie down with the child. Maybe the child falls asleep well. That doesn't always happen, but, maybe they fall asleep well and you're like, great, 5 minutes of my day, who cares? But when they turn over, when they enter a lighter sleep state, which is cyclical throughout the night for all of us, when they enter a lighter sleep state and they roll over and you're not there, they feel the need to reinstate that condition in order to fall back asleep.
So they can sleep, sure.
So it's similar to, as an adult, most adults sleep with a pillow, right? Well, if your pillow falls off the bed in the middle of the night, you're going to be, wake up to enough of a degree that you're going to have to reach down and pull that pillow back up, because we have to reinstate that condition because we fell asleep under it. And thinking about it as a broader category, I think, is helpful, because a lot of parents will tell me, I say, what are the conditions that your child falls asleep under? Is the door open or is the door closed? Well, the door is open until they go to sleep and then I close the door.
Problematic. Because they're used to that, especially if they wake up in the middle of the night.
Exactly. Or or the dimmer on the light is, it's on dim when they fall asleep, but I turn it all the way off when they fall asleep. Problematic.
Because they're getting conditioned to that. Let me ask you before we move forward. So let's say you're in a situation where you're having to be in the bed with the child for them to fall asleep, but you want to break it though. Do you have some suggestions around how to break it?
Yes. I want to give you one more example about conditions though, because this came up for my daughter with her son at about 11 months, and it involved the ceiling fan, what had been spinning in one direction. You know how you're supposed to have a fan that, like, if it's hot out, the fan makes the air go down, up, and if it's cold out, I don't know, whatever. Right. It's one of the, reverse the fan. So they had changed that one night because it was either hot or cold. I can't remember which. But her son, my grandson, was used to it spinning the other direction. What a night they had. I mean, up and down
just
and up
based
and
around it going the other way?
Correct.
Wow.
But because she knew that there was this principle of conditions, she thought, well, what changed? And she thought, you know what? We changed the direction of the fan.
And it really, that did it.
They switched it back and fine the next night.
Wow.
That's how powerful those conditions are, right? That we all associate with good sleep.
And so how would you break this? Let's say your child won't go to sleep without you being in the bed with them, and you started it as this thing just to calm them, and it was working great for a while, but now you're stuck because the kid won't sleep unless you're in bed with them, and you want to end it. How do you end it?
Well, that's where, first of all, you want to make sure you're set up for success. All of those other factors, every single one of them, have to be satisfied, right? So that the one remaining factor is you being in there versus you not being in there. So the way that it's by setting limits. And the way we set limits, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, you want to start, depending on the age of your child, you can prep them. So you can say, you know what? I have been making a big mistake. Oh boy, what? Ooh, mommy or daddy, parent makes a mistake. I want to listen to this, right? So you got their attention. And you say, I have been staying with you until you fall asleep at night. And that is a huge mistake. And now they're going to be suspicious, right? Wait a minute, because I want you to sleep with me. And you say, this is something you can do.
Right.
You can fall asleep. You can go to sleep on your own. You can stay asleep through the night, and you can wake up when the clock says X, Y, or Z, or when it's light out, or we can talk a little bit about how you can finesse that for younger kids. But you want to start out not at bedtime, but sometime during the day with a little bit of a warning.
Sure. So they know what's coming.
Exactly.
And it sounds like it's really around encouraging their ability to do it on their own.
No question. And
like you're big enough, you're old enough, you're mature. This is on you. I know you can do this.
Exactly. And one of the things that I think is so important is ultimately when we turn things over to children that they can do for themselves, we stop doing the things that they're capable of doing on their own, it builds self-esteem. And so one of my favorite stories about that is about a mom who came to me and said, my child's having trouble falling asleep at night, so I have to sit with him. And I said, well, how long do you have to sit there? And she said, well, it varies, but, usually about 3 hours.
Oh, my God.
Right? I was like,
That must be great for the marriage, too.
Right? And I was like, And she said, but it's not a problem. I just want to know what to do if it was a problem. Love that, right? So I told her what we're going to tell our listeners in just a minute. I told her how to take care of that, how to set limits around it. And she came back the next week. This was in one of my workshops, my beginning workshops. She came back the next week and she'd tried it. And she was exuberant. She said, it worked. I can't believe it worked. I said, well, tell me, how it went. So she said the night that she warned her child about how, that this was something that he could do and that she wasn't going to sit there anymore. And she had to set the limits, again, in the way that we're going to, give to the listeners in a moment. And he did it. He went to bed on his own and he stayed asleep throughout the night. The next morning, and this is what just feels so heartwarming to me. The next morning, she was making coffee in the kitchen when he got up, and he ran into the kitchen and he threw his arms around her legs and he said, Mommy, I did it. Wow.
Yeah.
He felt so successful.
Sure.
And he was about 5.
Mm-hmm.
At the time. But he felt so successful that he had done this thing, that he was independent, So we have to remember that these are the kinds of things, sleeping through the night, there's all other kind of feeding oneself, getting dressed. All of these things are kind of what we call real accomplishments. And we've talked about that in a previous episode too. But I find that parents often have trouble setting limits around nighttime, around bedtime.
Because they feel bad for the child.
Mm-hmm. And they don't want to end the day on a bad note.
Right. So that's part of the struggle. Well, that leads me to, because what do we do? You have a lot of examples in your book about the pushback.
Yeah.
Like whether it's the kid that gets up 15 times, the kind of testing that goes on around it, the kind of delay tactics that go on around it.
Right.
How do you handle that as a parent? I have to say, when I read the book, it seems like it has to do about using an iMessage and giving choices.
Correct.
So is that what we're leading towards?
No question. And that's the next thing we should talk about is, the first thing we want to do when we're setting limits around bedtime is that we want to use respectful communication that is clear, concise, and direct.
Mm-hmm.
So iMessages are all of those things. And the way that it would sound around bedtime is, you put your child to bed, you've given the warnings to lead up to bedtime, you've said goodnight, you've kissed them, you've left the room. They either are like, come back here, I can't sleep, or I need another hug, or I need another kiss, or I'm thirsty, I need water, I'm too hot, or I need my blanket,
Right.
I mean, they have infinite ways of testing us. Or maybe they just pop right out of bed.
Walk into the room.
Yeah. So, you're feeling pleased with yourself and you're part way down the hall and you look behind you and there they are, trailing by, a foot. So the very first step, regardless of the kind of testing, and all of that I put under the category of testing, whether they're physically getting up out of bed, whether they're calling for you, it doesn't really matter. The very first thing that you want to do is give an iMessage. So that's going to sound like, when you resist going to bed, I feel tired because nighttime is for sleeping. I would like you to get back into bed.
That's great. And I just want to tell our listeners too, if you're new to the podcast, we did a whole episode on iMessages and expanded on it. I can't remember. It's back towards the beginning. It was 4 or 5. You can find it. But if you don't know the iMessage, you should listen to that one because we do a deep dive on it. Okay, so the child's gotten up, however they have to annoy you. You give the iMessage that you just gave an example of that, which has 4 components to it.
Right. And I would, to add to what you just said, Greg, I would encourage our listeners to do a deep dive, because the more you use iMessages during the day to set limits, the more successful you'll be at night setting limits.
Mm-hmm.
So they build on each other, and the child becomes accustomed to the language, and it becomes more and more and more effective.
Sure.
So you say the iMessage, and, one of many things can happen. Either they continue to test, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they say no, or they become the Velcro child and cling to you, or they ignore you or make another excuse, or they say, okay, right? But it might be a temporary okay.
Sure, they get back into bed, but 5 minutes later they're up.
Correct. Regardless, within any particular night, you don't want to repeat that iMessage. You want to make sure that the next attempt to resist bedtime, no matter what it looks like, no matter if they've complied for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or until 3 a.m, and then they're up, the next attempt, you're going to want to give them a choice.
Mm-hmm. How does that manifest?
Mm-hmm. So in order for parents to be able to formulate an appropriate choice, we first have to take a look at what I call keys. So there are certain key components of your child's sleep pattern, and maybe they're conditions, right, that your child is used to sleeping under.
Yeah, you give a couple. This one was interesting to me. So in the book, you given a couple of examples of, like, let's say they have a light that they need on.
Right, a night light, let's say.
Or they need the door opened a little bit.
Correct.
And so the way you described it in the book is like you need to find one of these things that they need to sleep. Like, let's say they need 50 stuffed animals on their bed. That's another example.
Exactly.
And so as I understood it in the book is that you then, when you're giving choices, so you've given the iMessage and now the child is still testing again. So now you move to choices that you have to figure out what one of the keys is for your child and then use that in the choice. But the way you do it in the book is this is the part that might get sort of tricky because you do it in a very direct, kind of friendly way. So, like, let's say, and maybe let me describe it and you tell me if I'm doing it right. So let's say they need the light to go to sleep. And so your choice to them would be, if they've now rejected the iMessage, they're testing again, and you would say, I see that you need a choice. So you can either, your light seems to be keeping you awake. That's how you framed it.
Yes.
So you have a choice. You can either go to bed, or we can turn off the light.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
It is correct. And I would elaborate just a little bit and say, we want to put sleep on both sides of the equation. So you want to say you can either sleep with the light on, or you can sleep with the light off.
And for the stuffed animals, your example was, I see that your bed's too crowded with these stuffed animals. It must be making you uncomfortable. So you can either
sleep with all the stuffed animals, or you can sleep with no stuffed animals.
And the door was the same way. You used as a noise. Like, this kid loves to have his door open.
Yeah.
So, but you work that into the choice. But in this kind of way that's like, wow, I see, the door being open, the noise must be keeping you up.
Yeah. And so you have a choice. You can either sleep with the door open or sleep with the door closed.
I mean, the part that's hard for me, because I can know I'm a pushover. So when I think about it, because you gave another example where the father said to the daughter, because even before they got to the ritual, the bedtime ritual, the daughter was like, I don't want to go to bed, and I'm whining, and it was being a pain. And the father said, you have a choice. You can either start the ritual now and we can move towards bedtime, or we'll skip the ritual and you can go right to bed.
Exactly.
And the child immediately did something that delayed or whatever, and the father went right to the choice in this anecdote, or went right to the consequence was, I see you don't want to do the routine. We're going to bed. Pick the kid up to take her to bed. Of course, the child lost her mind.
Right.
And even as I'm reading it, I'm like, just one more chance. Because then the kid in the book was like, I'm so sorry. Please give me the routine. I'll do the routine. I'll never, ever do this again. And I can feel myself going like, all right, okay, if you'll do the routine, we'll do it. And your point is like, you really can't.
Well, I do give parents
There's some
little
flexibility
bit.
there.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing. What we know is that in order to develop responsibility
Right.
around any of this, kids have to be given another chance. They have to be given a chance to try again with the same behavior, the same routine, the same ritual. So knowing that a lot of parents are like you, I mean, I was, I had a softer heart too.
So it might not be the end of the world to say we can try one more time this evening.
Right.
Or you say you can try again tomorrow.
Right. So what I suggest to parents is that when your child throws that hissy fit, that you say, it sounds like you're really sorry that you chose to skip the routine and go straight to bed. Or it sounds like you're really sorry that you chose to sleep with the door closed. Or it sounds like you're really sorry that you chose to sleep with the light off, right? So whichever key you've used, and or whether you've chosen to, skip the routine and go straight to bed, that's kind of a key in and of itself. It doesn't matter. You can say this. It sounds like you're sorry that you chose to do this. And you know what? You can have a chance to try again in blank amount of time. So because it's happening at night, and because you're going to feel bad for them, you just probably are.
Yeah.
You can have a chance to try again in 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah. So you might leave the light off or their door closed. I mean, I think the main point you made...
Or put them in their bed, and then in 3 minutes you say, okay, you have a chance to try again with the routine.
Right.
So you can go back all the way there.
Right. But if you do it too much, I think the point you make in your book, and you've talked about this in the groups, is... Because again, as I'm reading, I'm like, that would be really hard to draw that hard a line. But you make the bigger point about your teaching, and this is something you mention a lot too, is like setting these sort of values up very early. Right. So now the child knows there's a consequence to your choices. Right. And you related it to even later on in life when it's drinking and driving or unprotected sex, or that you've very early on, when the stakes aren't that high.
Exactly.
Have now imparted this value about, hey, there's consequences to your choices.
Exactly. So you don't want to take back that choice multiple times. You want to give them a chance to try again. Once, maybe that night. But sometimes if you've got a really stubborn child, you might have to say at some point, you'll have the chance to try again tomorrow.
Yeah, if it goes on and on and on. You can't do it repeatedly. It's not going to have any power at all, right? If you push off the consequence.
Exactly. Now, I will say that the younger the child, the more chances you can give to try again within a night. But it should increase in terms of the amount of time that they have to be under that consequence. So again, back to my daughter, she had, her child was ready to have some consequences around sleeping through the night. So what you do is you say, you'll have a chance to try again in 3 minutes. You give them the chance to try again. You leave the room. They continue to cry or test. You say, you'll have a chance to try again in 6 minutes. You'll have a chance to try again in 12 minutes. So you increase the amount of time. Now, mind you, we're talking about a child who's under the age of 1.
Sure.
Right?
So
at that time.
So the consequence shifts, obviously, as they get older.
Correct. The consequence shifts as they get older, and the amount of time. So if you've got a 5-year-old, so for example, in the story that I just told about the woman who had the 5-year-old, she gave the iMessage once. She gave a choice once, which I think, if I'm recalling correctly, involved, closing the door. And then, I don't think he tested. I mean, the beauty of this is that they test less frequently than you think they're going to. Mm-hmm. But if he had tested, as a 5-year-old, she would have given him maybe one chance to try again. And then, okay, I see you've chosen to have the door closed for the night. You'll have a chance to try again tomorrow, right? She could have done that with a 5-year-old. The younger the child, the more you have to take into account what kind of memory they have, what language they have, whether they can sustain the message that you're giving to them for longer than 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, so it depends on the child. Can you tell this anecdote about your daughter and Biggie Bear?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it illustrates a lot of this on both sides.
Sure.
And so as I understand it, your daughter was having an issue with in the middle. She slept with this bear. Is it Biggie Bear?
Yes, his name is Biggie Bear. She still has Biggie Bear.
Wow, awesome. So Biggie Bear would fall out of bed.
Right.
She'd call out for you guys, usually in the middle of the night, and you would have to get up to go get Biggie Bear to put the bear back in the bed because that was her condition. That's how she was able to sleep. Am I explaining this right?
You're explaining it exactly correct.
And it affected both you and your husband, obviously.
Right. Well, because we would both wake up, and then, punch each other. You go. This time it's your turn, And then so we tried to alternate, but it was not healthy for our sleep habits. Right. And not healthy for our daughter's sleep habits either. Basically what happened was she was about 3 and she was in a toddler bed at that point. So she, she would lose Biggie Bear and she'd call out and we'd get up sleepily and give her Biggie Bear. Well, after about 3 nights of this, and 3 is kind of a magic number here. If something happens once, it could be a one-off, right?
Sure.
If it happens twice, you start kind of want to put your parental antenna up. If it happens 3 times, then you can be pretty sure it's a habit, right? So my husband and I, took advantage of it having happened 3 times to discuss what to do. And we decided that she needed a limit.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I think one of the important pieces of this is a preparation piece. I think you make the point like, this is going to be really annoying because we have to deal with this tonight. Because obviously at 3 a.m, a lot of times you don't want to deal with that. Like, I'm just going to get up and get the bear.
Right.
But if you take one night to deal with it, and you might say to yourself, this is the preparation. Okay, we're going to deal with this tonight. We might be up for an hour dealing with this.
Right.
But if we do it now, we're going to get to sleep.
Exactly.
And this won't keep happening. So I just want to say that. So you and your husband have a conversation. Okay, if this happens again tonight, this is what we're going to do.
Exactly. So sure enough, she woke up in the middle of the night. Mommy, Daddy, I need Biggie Bear, in this tremulous voice. And we knew we were going to set a boundary. We said, getting Biggie Bear is something you can do. No, I can't. Ah! When you refuse.
And you're kind of calling this out, right? I don't think you got up.
From room to room. Yeah. So I once got asked the question, or maybe more than once, well, do you have to yell from the other room or could you get up and go? And the answer to that is, as long as the child can't see you, you can go. You can get up and go, but it didn't occur to us. But you could go around the corner so you're not having to yell. So we said, when you, this is something you can do. No. When you refuse to get Biggie Bear in the middle of the night yourself, we feel tired because nighttime is for sleeping. You can get Biggie Bear on your own.
Right.
That hiccuping, crying that they do. And she was like, but I'm scared. Now, I want to just pause there and say that fear, when a child says that they're scared, is the undoing of most parents.
Right.
Because they think, oh my gosh, my child's scared. Mm-hmm. I can't leave them scared. And there's multiple problems with that. But a huge one is that if you behave as if there's something to be afraid of. So if your child wakes up in the middle of the night, I have to sleep with you because I'm scared. I can't get Biggie Bear because I'm scared. I can't go to sleep because I'm scared. If you acquiesce to that and allow them to stay up later, allow them to crawl in bed with you, or as my husband and I did, go in and get Biggie Bear because she was afraid.
Too frightened to get out, right?
You reinforce the idea that there is something to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
Look, there was nothing in Emily's room, that was going to
eat
her. There were no lions around the corner. There are no such thing as monsters or ghosts. It was, she could get Biggie Bear. So saying that she's afraid is immaterial. We have to behave as though both that there's not something to be afraid of and that she can work through that fear. Mm-hmm. She can tolerate that and she can overcome that.
And that's what you guys kind of did in that evening. And I think the key is you never got up. You basically, I mean, I think, does it evolve to choices? Like,
yes,
you have a choice. You can either get out of the bed and get Biggie Bear, or you won't sleep with him tonight, I guess.
that was the exact choice. And so we gave that choice.
And you said that she was quiet for a bit, and you thought, oh man, maybe she got Biggie Bear. And then suddenly she was like, I can't do it. And this is the thing. Now you're like half an hour, 40 minutes into this thing, but
oh
it's
my
like,
gosh,
you
it's
gotta,
brutal.
you gotta hold on, right?
You gotta follow through, which we did. And, and then I want to speak to kind of the typical listener and talk about following through. We did. And she said, but I can't, and we had been praying that she had fallen back asleep,
Sure.
honestly, because it was like, it's brutal. And we reiterated the choice. Well, you don't have to get Biggie Bear. You can either sleep with Biggie Bear or sleep without Biggie Bear. And there was this other long silence. And then this shout, I got Biggie Bear. I did it. And we were like, good for you. And kind of good for us because,
Sure.
oh my gosh, we've
Sure.
been awake for 45 minutes.
Can I just say something? Because even as you're talking, I can hear in your voice, it's not that you're not empathetic, but
Right.
you're more direct and clear, encouraging.
Yes.
But it's not about, oh, honey, it seems like, right? I don't know. I'm just getting
Right.
that from the way you're sort of reiterating the story. It's just like you're talking to them.
Yes.
Like, hey, you can handle this. You can do it.
Exactly. So we're building confidence in them. When parents set these kind of limits, and the truth of the matter is when we set limits at any point, but, especially at night, we are building success for them.
Mhm.
Because when they do it, we never, ever, after that time, she was 3 years old. How many times after that did she maybe lose Biggie Bear in the middle of the night? I don't know, because she didn't call
Never
us.
again. You didn't,
Never had to deal with it again because she knew she could handle it.
Right.
And I think when I work with parents around this issue of sleep, and they tell me, kind of all of the circumstances and how it's been going and what they've been doing. And, and I help identify what's been going wrong. I tell them, are you ready to
Right.
do this?
Right.
Because I'm going to give you the technique that you need to solve this. I can guarantee it will solve it within 4 nights usually.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 2 weeks to solidify a good sleep habit. But generally speaking, it's 4 nights. But if you're not ready to do this, please don't start it. Because if you start it, but then your child is up for an hour, it's rarely more than an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But if your child is up for an hour, that's going to feel like 14 hours to you in the middle of the night. If your child's up for an hour and you say, okay, fine, and you give in, all you've done is teach that child to
If they hold out long enough, they're going to get it.
To test for an hour. And then the next time, if you're like, okay, I'm ready now, and you'll do it for an hour, well, they've learned to go to an hour.
Sure.
So they'll go longer. You have to be ready to do this. And I think another key here, Greg, and you said it, but I want to underscore it, is this idea of respect. Speaking in a respectful way to your child, in an encouraging way to your child. You're not shaming them about not being able to go to sleep. You're not shaming them. Oh my God, there's nothing to be afraid of. What are you afraid of? Big bad bear's going to come get you. Monster under the bed. There's no shame. It's factual.
Sure.
And as the parent, when you have that level of confidence to be able to stay calm yourself, you are giving that gift to your child,
Mm-hmm.
that gift of calm. Oh my gosh, it's not unsafe here. There
Sure.
aren't monsters under the bed. This is something I can do. So you want to make sure that your tone of voice is calm and respectful and firm.
Right. So those are the keys. The one other thing I forgot to mention earlier on that you talk about is that giving attention, that it's important, like if the child gets up and says, I'm going to the bathroom again, that you don't get up to help them. And because that's what they're sort of searching for, this idea like, okay, let's make it quick. You got this, or whatever it is, that don't
Right.
give them the attention around whatever their thing is, or else you're just encouraging that behavior to continue.
Right, exactly. Again, a scenario using my daughter, she had just learned to use the potty by herself. And, they're clever. Kids are clever. So she would say, we'd put her to bed, do the whole routine, and she'd say, I have to go pee-pee. And we'd say, okay, because we wanted to reinforce the toilet, learning to use the toilet.
Sure.
So we'd take her to the toilet, tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. Great. Finished. Yes. Okay. Come back to bed. We'd put her back to bed. 5 minutes later, I have to go pee-pee. And we're like, you just went pee-pee. I have to go pee-pee again. So we'd take her to the toilet. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. She learned to hold it.
Yeah, of course.
Oh
She's like, I can make this go for a while. Just let a little bit out. I got a full tank. We're going to run this one for a couple hours.
Oh my goodness. I was like, wow, you are a little clever kiddo here. And it's not the only time I've heard that. I heard that actually from about 2 weeks ago. Someone called me about a sleeping issue and was saying kind of the same thing. So what we did on that was we said, you have a choice. You can either finish going potty this time when we take you, or you can go by yourself. I don't want to go by myself. Well, you can either go by yourself or you can pee in the bed. Now, that's pretty radical.
Right.
Right? And parents are going to be like,
but you reached that point.
At some point, you got to stop taking them to the bathroom.
Sure.
And especially when they've learned to hold it. Yeah, that's another way that kids test. And they have infinite ways of testing us.
So why don't we wrap up by talking just a little bit about teenagers and how it shifts? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of my own kids that I think because there's not huge struggles, I don't really think about it too much. But how does it shift when? Is it just that if there is an issue, then you have to address it, or what do you keep in mind with teenagers for bedtimes?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think the most important thing.
And I will just say, I'm sorry that I'm sure most of your issues that you're dealing with is usually with younger children around bedtime struggles.
Well, yes and no. I mean, what I would say is parents have a lot more agency when their children are young in terms of straightening out sleep habits. The problem with teenagers, one of the many problems with teenagers, and I should say it's my favorite age group. I love teenagers, and they have their issues. One of the problems with teenagers and sleep is that what we call their circadian rhythm changes. And this is a physiological change. And what it means is that their body is designed in adolescence to not feel sleepy until later at night, and to be sleepier in the morning and not want to get up until later. It's not an act of will on their part. It really is a physiological shift that occurs. So you've got this kid, you went through all of this with them as a toddler, you got them in a good sleep habit, and boom, they're 11 years old, they're entering tweenhood, and all of a sudden they can't sleep. Again, it's not an act of will. Now, there are contributing factors, right, that depending on the age of your child, you either have control over or you've lost it and you just have to let it go. And the contributing factor is screen time.
Sure. That's the biggest. I'm sure we struggle with it. It's tough.
I know. And, I feel for parents today because back in the day when I was raising my kids, all we had was television, and that was we had one, and it was in the main room, and it wasn't something they could carry into bed with them.
Right.
Nowadays, the problem is that many kids have to use screens for homework and that kind of thing. So the screen time definitely increases the likelihood that they're going to have trouble sleeping.
Sure.
So I guess my first piece of advice to parents is when you initially give your child a device, a phone, an iPad, a laptop, whatever it is, be sure that you have some rules around it. I mean, over and over again, Greg, I hear about parents whose kids are in 4th grade or 5th grade, right? Which is right before the circadian rhythms generally change. And they'll hand their child a phone so that they can get in contact with their child during the day or whatever, I guess when they're at school. And the child believes that phone belongs to them, belongs to the child. So you can't control it, mom or dad. You have to set it up so that the child knows that there are rules surrounding this phone, that the phone is a privilege.
Sure.
And that if you can't act responsibly with that privilege, it will be taken away.
Well, it seems like that's where you're leading towards too, is it's another thing around consequences. Like if your kid's staying up, you allow them to have their computer in their room, at least keep it in there. But if they're up till 3 a.m. watching Netflix, that's where you're moving towards, right? If like there's a real issue around the sleep habits, is that your next step with teenagers, I imagine, right? Like if you're gonna hang out and be on TikTok till 2 a.m, you can't have your phone in your room. I mean, I would imagine you'd recommend, this is such a challenge and we're not great at it. It goes back and forth, but that they shouldn't even probably have their phone in their room because it's too tempting.
Yeah. And of course, the problem is the older your child gets, the less you can control that.
Sure.
Unless you're going to stay up all night, which I don't recommend.
Right.
So they generally are going to, their circadian rhythms are going to dictate that they're going to want to go to bed after when you go to bed. You're going to want to go to bed beforehand.
Sure.
So then, it's free reign for them. And so you can say, well, we're going to charge the device in the kitchen or whatever, but then they're going to, after you're in bed, they're going to get up and go get it. Which is really why it's important when you first hand them the device.
Yeah, it's really, this feels like it just comes back to the same thing it always does, is that you have a really open conversation about it.
Exactly.
Treating them as an equal, coming up with compromises. How do we deal with this, especially if it becomes an issue, as opposed to just getting punitive, which always kind of backfires. Isn't that what you would say?
Exactly. I mean, the older your child is, the less likely you're going to be effective if you give iMessages and choices. It's just not going to work because they'll find ways around it. They'll find ways to break the rules. The older your child is, the more you do have to engage in a real dialogue with them and sit down and say, I feel concerned that getting up or staying up until 3 a.m. is affecting your ability to get up to go to school in the morning.
Sure.
So how can we work this out? How can I support you in creating a better or a more appropriate habit for yourself, given the responsibilities that you have during the day? Would it help to charge your computer in the kitchen, or would it help to, put it over on your desk instead of in bed?
Sure. You just have to work with them to find solutions.
Because you won't have control.
Right.
You just won't have control.
Dang it.
I know.
It's over.
I know. It's
Great.
terrible.
So, I mean, just to kind of wrap up, it seems like if there's a few main points to hold on to: preparation, ritualization, you talk about being firm. I mean, is there anything else really that parents should sort of keep in mind for this battle, the sleeping blues battle, if you're having issues?
I mean, I think you've pretty much said it. You want to set your child up for success, right? And that's at any age. You want to make sure that they have a good bedtime routine that they can sustain even when they're older. Like if you get them into the routine of reading books, then it's more likely that they're going to want to read a book before they go to bed, even when they're pre-adolescent or adolescent, right? And that's appropriate. And, when they're young, we want to set the limits that allow them to develop these positive habits. We want to make sure that I'm not going to do a double negative. We want to make sure that we feel comfortable being in charge and communicating to them that we're in charge in a respectful and calm way.
Great. I mean, I love to sleep. So
Me too.
You do all this conversation. I think I'm going to maybe go take a nap now with these tools.
I take a nap every day.
They're the best. All right. Great. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks for listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your family and friends. And if you'd like to hear more about Julie's work, join one of her parenting groups, or see about individual counseling, please visit parentinghorizons.com. Or you can email Julie at julie.ross@parentinghorizons.com.
See you next time.